Monica Inzer, and I'm the Vice President for Enrollment Management here at Hamilton. I'm lucky enough to work with the two colleagues also on the screen with me, and I'm going to let each of them say a little bit about themselves and their experience in this profession and at Hamilton, and whatever else they want to say. I'll start with you, Peaches.
Great. Thanks, Monica. Good evening, everyone. My name is Peaches Valdes. I'm the Dean of Admission here at the college. I'm glad to be able to spend this evening with you all. Looking forward to some really great conversation. I actually just had my 4-year anniversary here at Hamilton this summer. So I graduated, I guess, from Hamilton in the employment way. And then prior to that, I had been—
You don't get to leave.
I know, I don't get to, exactly. I'm staying on for my post-grad years. And so prior to this, I was at a small women's college outside of Philadelphia, which was also my alma mater for about 17 plus years. I've done my primary work has been in higher ed and admissions, but I've been a Title IX officer, equal opportunity, and a social justice faculty member. So looking forward to spending time with you this evening.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Peaches. Cameron, you're up.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I'm Cameron Feist. As you can see by the little numbers after my name, I'm the Hamilton graduate on the panel here. I graduated in the class of 2004. I have the pleasure of serving as Hamilton's Associate Vice President for Enrollment Management and Director of Financial Aid. Been doing that for the better part of a decade. And prior to that, I had the opportunity to work with high school students as a Director of College Counseling at a K-12 independent day school. And then I started my career back in 2004, right after graduation, working in the admission office. So I've worked in kind of all aspects of the Hamilton admission and enrollment more broadly shop. And I look forward to an active conversation tonight. Thank you guys for joining us.
Thank you, Cameron. So as you can tell, I'm with these great professionals who know a lot about admission and financial aid and enrollment and have worked at Hamilton for a while, but at other places as well. I myself have been doing this for more than 30 years, and I'm in my 18th year at Hamilton overseeing admission and financial aid, which is my pleasure, truly. And admitting the future of this college, considering applications from so many talented students, is really something. It's a humbling experience. It's something we never take for granted. And it's a responsibility that we're quite proud of. So it's in that spirit that we're bringing you this event tonight. We called it The Room Where It Happens. And for those of you who are Hamilton the musical fans, you'll get that reference. It's a popular song in the musical and refers to not a real place, the room where it happens, but the concept of it is that in the admission committee room or the conference room or the space where your application is considered, we wanted to bring that to you tonight, answer your questions, hopefully de-escalate the anxiety that comes this time of year around the college admission process, which can be stressful, and we'd like it to not be for you. So we're going to try and be transparent and honest and talk to you from not literally the room where it happens, but figuratively from the place where it happens here on campus. Actually, Peaches is in her office in Suite House, which, as some of you who got on early saw, is the building behind Cameron in the picture. That is the House of Admission and Financial Aid, Suite House here at Hamilton. Peaches is in her office. I'm actually in my office, not too far down the hall. Cameron is not too far from us either. And we are here to answer your questions. So again, the goal of the event is to de-escalate the stress around this process. A lot of you submitted questions ahead of time, and more than we could answer in the hour. So I want to apologize in advance that we're not going to get to answer all of your questions. We took the ones that are most general, that we think will apply to the most people who are watching tonight's event. And we hope that my lights will go on and off tonight. We care about energy and sustainability here at Hamilton, as demonstrated by the motion lights. So I will have to wheel around my office a few times. In any case, we will answer questions that we think apply to the most people. If we don't answer your question, I hope that you will submit it in the chat room. We have two staff members from the admission office who are staffing that for us. They're going to try and do the Q&A for you there, or point you to places on the website. And if they don't get to it and we don't get to it, please follow up. we really want to answer your questions, and I feel bad we can't get to every single one of them, but we're gonna, again, do the best job we can. So let's get at it. Tonight is mostly about Hamilton. We're going to answer the questions from our perspective and about our process, but of course, drawing on our years of experience in this field, not just at Hamilton, but don't assume the way Hamilton answers a question is true at all of your colleges. We think much of what we have to say tonight will be applicable to many of your colleges, especially if you're looking at places like Hamilton. But I have to put that disclaimer out there out front that the questions we're answering tonight and the stance we're representing is from Hamilton College. So I want to acknowledge the students who are here with us, who've been through a lot. We know your high school experience has been anything but normal. I was talking with a few colleagues recently, and we said seniors in high school right now, the last time you had a normal year was your 9th grade. 10th grade was disrupted by the pandemic. Your junior year was disrupted. Hopefully things are getting a little more back to normal for you now, but we know your high school experience has been disrupted. Your transcript may look different. Your experience is different. It's normal to you. Let's be honest that you know no different. And so that's okay. I don't want to over dramatize this, but I do want to acknowledge that you're trying to find your way in the middle of a pandemic or coming out of a pandemic, and people are different because of that. Admissions processes are different. We're going to talk about some of that tonight. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge that, and we acknowledge your resilience. What we've seen in you is inspiring to us. Frankly, it keeps us coming to work every day, and it's why we do what we do. And your parents are doing the best they can. We know a lot of them are joining us tonight. We're grateful for that. And we get to talk to a lot of families through the admission and financial aid process. And we just want to thank you all for being present, for persisting during a really difficult time, and for being with us tonight. So we're going to jump right in. The first topic is around, maybe this helps you to know the topics we're going to move through tonight. We're going to talk about building a list and exploring colleges, how you do that. This is the time of year you need to soon be finalizing your list. And we're going to talk about applying to colleges, application requirements, what's required, what's optional, financial aid, how you assess fit and all of those pieces of the process, and then how we make decisions, which is what I think a lot of you signed on for and are interested in. I can tell from the comments and notes you've submitted. So that's really where we get to the room where it happens. We'll throw in lots of advice along the way. So let's start with building the list. Some of the questions are around how do you assess fit? How do you determine what's a good choice college for you, where you would be happy, especially if you can't visit. And Hamilton, our motto is know thyself. The truth is you never really know thyself. It's a lifelong process, but it starts now as you're thinking about where you might be happy, what's the kind of place you would call home, where will you become the person you're meant to become, and what's the best environment for that. So I'm going to start with you, Peaches, if you have a little bit of advice on how students can assess fit, whether it's visiting, not visiting, how they explore their colleges and decide where to apply.
Sure. I think it's always good for self-reflection to think about what excites you. What do you like about school? What maybe you are not as excited about in school, and using that kind of as some initial questions to start the process. Definitely working with your college counseling office, if you have those resources available, actually will help kind of, they'll help you narrow down your list. They'll give you recommendations. And then using, looking at websites, college websites, if you've received college information, start looking at them, especially if they catch your eye. It may not be a school that you're familiar with, but that's okay, because it'll give you a lens into what's available to you and what opportunities and resources are available at certain types of schools. Because then you'll start seeing various themes, like you like the idea of a smaller institution, or one near a city, or one more in a rural area, or in an urban setting. So the idea is you can start narrowing them down. And so by now, if you're seniors, definitely you've narrowed them down a bit. And so it really focuses a lot on researching the individual schools on your list. And through those, you really get a good sense as to whether or not this school is a place where you will have a variety of opportunities for you to take advantage of, but also be in a setting, in a community where you're going to thrive. I think one of the questions we always get is, visit or no visit. And I think one of the silver linings of the pandemic is because students couldn't travel, is that we created these robust virtual offerings, a suite of ways to find out, to see from a lens of a student's perspective, and admission officers, from faculty, staff, members across our communities. And with that, we provide a lot of opportunities for students to really get a sense of, if I physically cannot visit, and that still might not be possible, do I have a good sense of what the community is like? Do I feel a connection with the student body? Do they have the resources, the academic opportunities available for me, where I feel like if I took advantage of those, I would be fully supported on campus? And so I think in the end, I think definitely researching, is very important. I think students need, and families need to be, they have to educate themselves about this process, and they have to do the research. And yes, it takes a while, but by now, if you're seniors, you've probably narrowed it down a bit, so you have a pretty good sense. But it's a process that you'll continue to do even throughout the application process, like learning more about the communities.
Great. Thank you, Cameron. I wanted you to answer a question about the pandemic, and it's a little bit of old news now, and we're all a little tired of talking about it, but it's still real. And I think it may be a factor for some families. I wonder if you think it should be a factor of how colleges endured the pandemic, if that should be a factor that families consider as they're looking at colleges.
So it's a good question. It's certainly timely. I think it should be, to the extent that families can make that determination as prospective students. I think when I think about how colleges, or how Hamilton in particular, cared for students during this really tumultuous period in our world's history, it was an extension of what we do every day, which is that we're a highly personal, individualized educational institution where we tend to overextend ourselves to students. And we really want to be there to hold students' hands appropriately throughout their college journey. And when something as disruptive as a global pandemic happened, we didn't have to change who we are as an institution. We just had to keep extending our hands in the ways that we were very accustomed to doing. And I think in this day and age where students are heading off to college, it's really important that both the students and their parents feel like they're going to a place that's going to take care of them. And it's going to ensure that the education that they're being offered is being offered in a safe and supportive environment. And students would certainly find that at a place like Hamilton.
Yeah, I think our location allowed us to be really safe, our size, the personal attention, as you mentioned. And I remember you saying to me at one point, Cameron, never before did we feel more like a home for our students than when we weren't. Mm-hmm. And we realized how much, when we had to send students home during the pandemic, they missed us. They missed being here. They missed their professors. They missed their friends. And that felt great to us in lots of ways. It was sad as well. So it's great to be back now. Pretty normal. Everybody on campus is vaccinated. We're still testing. We're very safe. And we're proud of what we've been able to do to support students. I think, as you said, that's it shouldn't be a factor. Let's hope when these students are arriving on their college campuses, this is not something we're still talking about, but how the resources schools have and the attention they give students and how much they care should be a factor, because there may be other crises down the road and you just want to be well cared for. And I think as a parent of a college student, I know that matters to me. There's another question here. Is there, I'm going to give this to you, Peach, is one perfect college out there for each student? What do you think about that?
No, I don't think so. I think that every school can be, I think a student can have and build a list that are perfect or good fits, that these are going to be places where that student is going to be happy and they are going to thrive. I think definitely when one says the perfect college, I don't think there is a perfect college. I think that a student creates a perfect college experience because they go there. It's not necessarily about the immediacy of like when they apply, this is the perfect college. I think there is this level of, I don't want students to expect, to come to an institution and realize, oh my gosh, this is not my perfect college. No, when I talk to students about building their list and I give them advice, I say, you need to build a list that's going to be, when you have to make a decision, you can say every single school on this list, I can be totally happy. I know I'm going to have the level of support that I would want, the opportunities in and out of the classroom. And I know that I will be successful with that college's support. So I don't Honestly, I always want to tell students, don't choose a perfect college because there really isn't one.
You concur, Cameron?
I totally agree. Even as a very, very proud Hamilton graduate, the reality, and when I was on the high school side of this, this is the area where I saw students experiencing more pressure than almost any other aspect, which is that if you're joining us on this call tonight, then in all likelihood, you've worked really hard in high school and you're probably taking some really hard classes and you're involved in lots of things. And this should be the reward, is that you get to look at so many great schools. And if you go through this process the way that Peaches just described and develop a really great comprehensive college list where you'd be happy with any of those schools and really do that homework, then I totally agree. There's no perfect college for a student. But if you're looking at schools like Hamilton, I certainly think you're on the right track to finding the perfect college for you, which is frankly just wherever you land is going to be great and you're going to have great options. And I do think there is a little bit of a burden of choice in this process because you're all are really smart students and you're gonna have a lot of options in this process, and that can feel really overwhelming. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, but on the topic of choice, I have a colleague who always says there are 3 decisions to be made here: where you apply, and then who gets in, and then where you go. And the students get to make 2 out of 3 of those, right? And so you still have some control over this process, and just remember that and feel like you're in the driver's seat a little bit. Right. Financial aid is a factor for a lot of families. At Hamilton, around half of our families receive financial aid. So how does that play into building a list? How do you know if a school might be affordable? Can you say a little bit about that for us, Cameron?
Yep, absolutely. And this has changed over the years, in part because all colleges are now required to have something on their websites called a net price calculator. You might hear some colleges refer to it as an NPC in short. But any college that's issuing what's called Title IV federal financial aid has to have a net price calculator, which permits families to do some research that didn't used to be available to them on the front end to try to ascertain whether or not the college is affordable. And I think it's so important, obviously, that you do this research for every college to which the student is ultimately going to be applying. I also think it's equally important, and I say this whenever I talk at high schools, that you involve the high school guidance office, whatever shape or form that may be, in the conversation, in as much as to let them know that, financial aid is going to be a factor for us. Can you help us build a list that can support that? Because that can help shape the list. If you're working with somebody in developing that list. But I think financial aid, there should be no apology for cost being a factor. College is really expensive. It's certainly, in my and probably our collective opinions here, a worthwhile investment, but it's a significant one. And so you want to go into it with your eyes open. And so similar to what Peaches was talking about before, about doing your research on developing that college list, you also want to do your research and fill out the net price calculators at colleges that you think you may apply to.
Great. Thank you. All right, well, let's move to applying. Let's assume everybody on our call is going to put together a list. Hamilton may well be on it, and they'll have lots of other good schools, I'm sure. None as good as Hamilton, but other good schools. And they're going to be navigating the application process, which is the next stage, right, once you have your list. And so somebody submitted a fairly simple, straightforward question that we assume they all know, but it starts at the basics. How do you apply? Where do you go to apply to colleges? Peaches, can you answer that one?
Sure, absolutely. So I think that's a great question. And I think the thing is, there are a variety of ways that students can start this application process and submitting. One, they can go to the individual schools. And what's great about that is our schools link to the main sites on where to apply. So for example, at Hamilton, if you go to our apply page, it will actually show you the various deadlines that we have, the various rounds. So early decision versus regular. But then if you click on it to say apply, it goes straight to the common application, or it could go to the coalition application or the QuestBridge application. So we have a variety of ways that various platforms in which students can actually submit their applications. For the most part, majority most of our students actually apply through the Common App. And through that, that's a great platform for students to actually assemble all of their applications in many ways. And so they'll create a My List. So once you have all your lists together, you'll create a My List of colleges, and then each one of them will have their own set of directions. So it'll have a set of primary questions and answers that students are going to have to complete, like demographic information, the college essay, and then schools may have additional information that we want you to provide. So one important thing that I tell students, and I know that Cameron does this for financial aid, and Monica, you do this. It's important for people to read directions. We have them for a reason. It's because we don't want you to possibly miss something in the process and may impact your application or may not be included in your application. So it's really important for families and students specifically to put together, to make sure that they're following all the directions, that they're submitting all the required information. And then once they apply to our individual institutions, one at Hamilton specifically, you'll get an email from me, welcoming you and congratulating you on submitting your application, but then also giving you access to your applicant portal. And through that, you'll be able to, as a student, be able to monitor everything through the process, like when decisions are going to be released, to what are the required pieces of your application, to what are some optional ways that you can share your interest in Hamilton with us as well. And of course, throughout the process, we'll be updating you and sending you reminders. And I know that for Cameron as well, that will happen too for students applying for financial aid.
Yep, and if I can just piggyback from there, after you get the email from Peaches inviting you to your admission applicant portal, within the next usually a couple of days, you'll get an email from me that will have a list of all the financial aid requirements if you indicated that you're going to be seeking financial aid on whatever application you submitted for admission. If you want to know what's required in advance, it's all out on our website, as it is on all the college websites. And at Hamilton, there's two main applications that we require. One is the FAFSA, which stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, and the other one is the CSS Profile, which stands for the College Scholarship Service Profile, which is supported through College Board. Both are available as of October 1 of your senior year. So if you wanted to go out there and start to put those together, even in advance of applying for admission, you certainly can do that if you want to kind of get it out of the way.
Great. So we're throwing a lot of information at you, and it can be overwhelming, but there are lots of instructions. There are lots of directions. We send you emails, as Peaches mentioned. Cameron and Peaches both send emails to candidates, and we try to make it as easy as possible. Having said that, I'm going to step out of my role as Vice President for Enrollment and put on my parent hat and say that when my son, who's now a college junior, was applying, and again, I've been doing this for 30 years, and he's been my son for 20 now. And I was amazed at how overwhelming it was for him. And it was a great window for me to sit and see the pain points, the pressure points. And so after he went through Common Application, which feels like it's making it so simple because you can apply through many schools at once, doing the individual supplements, or if you use the coalition application, or if you go through QuestBridge, you have this portal where you can apply. And he thought when he was done, he was done. And I said, well, now you need to go out to College Board and send your test scores. We will get to test scores soon. I know there are a lot of questions about those. And he said, Common App doesn't do that for me. And I said, no. And so, and honestly, we would love it if Common App and College Board could talk to each other and figure that out. But that's something we've been working on for years, and it isn't there. So you have to pay attention to that piece. And then I said to him, now you have to develop a relationship with each of those schools where you applied, and they're going to have follow-up information, materials, requests. And he said, how rude. To which I said, not really. You've applied to these schools. Now you have to have individual relationships. You can't do it en masse. And so it was interesting to see it through his eyes. So I tell you that on the front end, that you need to manage your relationships with your schools, and you need to take it seriously. You want to be the best candidate you can be for each of your schools, and read your instructions and follow the steps in the process that we will give you and make clear to you as you go through it. There's another question here, which is a favorite of mine tonight. What the heck does holistic admission mean? And I'm going to start this and let my colleagues chime in, but holistic, the admission staff at Hamilton knows it's a little pet peeve for me. I think it's the most overused word by admission counselors that we like to throw around, and families just shake their head like, what the heck does holistic admission mean? It's actually an accurate word, and it's truthful, and it's transparent. And what we mean when we use that which I try not to use, but when people use that, they mean there's not one thing, one aspect of a candidate. So if it was easy, we would tell you need this GPA and this test score and you can get in. But it's never just one thing or two things. We're looking at the context, we're looking at the school you attend, we're looking at the rigor of your high school, we're looking at what you could bring to our community. So we're looking holistically at all of the aspects of every individual candidate. And then when we're shaping a class and figuring out who to invite to join our community, we're looking collectively at a group of people from different backgrounds and interests and ideologies and religions and viewpoints and just a diverse perspective that you can learn from each other, right? And so all of that matters. And there are many qualified candidates that I wish we could admit we run out of room for qualified students before we run out of spots in the class. And that's the hardest part of our job. But we're shaping a class looking at all of those factors for each individual candidate and then for the needs of the college and the class we're seeking to enroll. So there's not one thing. We can't give you a roadmap. There's not a grid where you can go out there and see if you're admissible. And that is really hard for families. We understand that. And it's why you look at multiple colleges, particularly if you're looking at highly selective colleges. Would either of you like to add anything to that? It's a big question. You're good? You're good with that? Okay. Cameron, you started to talk about the financial aid application process and when people can apply. Can you say a little bit about our stance, how it might differ from other colleges' stance, and what the process of awarding financial aid is like at Hamilton?
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. And I'm going to try to stay at a fairly high level with this because we can get bogged down in the details. But obviously, if you have additional questions, please feel free to email the office, or you can spend time on our website, which probably has the majority of the answers there as well. So first and foremost, Hamilton is committed to making a Hamilton education accessible for qualified students. And so that means that we meet 100% of demonstrated financial need for all admitted students. And we are need blind in the admission process for our domestic first year applicants, which is obviously the majority of students who come in to the college. What it means to meet full need, it means that we only offer what's called need-based aid. So we do not offer athletic scholarships. We don't offer merit scholarships. What we do is an evaluation of each family's resources to determine how much that family can reasonably afford to contribute to their students' education. And then we take that number from Hamilton's costs, and the difference between those two things is demonstrated financial need, which we meet with a combination of scholarships. Typically the majority is the scholarships, which is the free money bucket of resource. And then we do, for most students, award a single subsidized federal loan and a reasonable work study request. And we're committed to meeting full need each year, which is one of the reasons that we have students and families reapply for financial aid each and every year, so that we can look at how resources may have changed during their time while they're at Hamilton. One of the resources that changes that families don't often think about is the number of children in the household who are going to college at the same time. So that's something to think about as you're heading through college, particularly if you're the student, have younger siblings who are coming up behind you. That may have a pretty big impact on your eligibility for financial aid in your future years at Hamilton, meaning your family contribution would go down and your scholarship would go up. But similar to what I was talking about earlier with Monica's question about the pandemic, our office is certainly an extension of the college in that personalized approach. So our effort, our focus is really to make a concerted effort to have a very personal process. So if you have unique circumstances, if you have concerns, if you have questions, we want to hear from you. And we don't really care what stage you are in this process. We want to hear from you before you apply, once you apply, after you gain admission, and then certainly throughout your 4 years on our campus. And we really view our job here as not just a job of helping to admit the freshman class, although that's certainly a big part of it, but just as important is to support students throughout their time here and watch them graduate in 4 years after they matriculate.
Well said. This year, I think we will be giving out $49 million in financial aid, right, Cameron?
49.2 to be exact. Yep.
Okay, and that's the best part of my job. Admitting great students to Hamilton is the second best part, but then providing them the resources to make sure they're able to attend Hamilton is pretty special. So the financial aid office is pretty spectacular at Hamilton. Cameron's here. I'm going to put in a plug for them, but it's one of the things when you're seeking a college of fit. We talked about finances, but it's also about the support, as Cameron mentioned. And will they be there for you all 4 years? And given we meet 100% need and your needs change, that's an important factor for families to consider. So related to this, and some questions have come in the chat about this as well, related or unrelated, I want to talk about early decision. For some families, financial aid is a factor on whether or not they can apply early decision. But this is a hot topic, especially this time of year. We are less than a month from our first early decision deadline of November 15th. So Peaches, who should apply early decision?
Sure. I think that a student, if they have found a school where they could, which is a good fit, they've done their research, both in terms of financially, academically, and socially, and they know that unequivocally, this is their number one school, this is their top, then a student should apply early decision. Recently I talked to some families and I said, the student statement or the family statement should not be, we want to apply early decision, we don't know where yet. Instead, it should be, I love Hamilton so much, I want to be at Hamilton, I'm going to apply early decision. And I think the thing is that by this time, you've done your research and you found that this is going to be a place where you're going to be happy and thrive, and it's a good fit for your family as well. And so if you know that for certain, then I would encourage students to apply early decision. But if there's any type of hesitation or doubt or the level of uncertainty, or there's some questions regarding the social or the financial and the academic fit, then students should not go early decision.
Cameron, you want to jump in?
Yeah, let me jump in real fast. Thank you. I know typically the follow-up question here is, what about financial aid if I apply early decision? And I was thinking back, I started working in high schools in 2009. And back then, we used to, as a general rule, caution families from applying early decision for whom financial aid was going to be a major factor in their decision. And that really changed in 2011 when the federal government came in and said, everybody's got to develop net price calculators on their website, which was a good and productive change. And what that means for all of you is you can do so much more research now than you could ever do before around financial aid. The deadlines to apply for financial aid have all changed in terms of when those applications become available. So as I mentioned before, you can submit the FAFSA, you can submit the profile before you ever apply to colleges. And from Hamilton's side, we are going to determine the exact same financial aid eligibility, whether you apply early decision 1, early decision 2, regular decision, it doesn't matter. We use the exact same formulas for students, regardless of when they apply for admission. So from our side, it doesn't matter. From your side, hopefully you can do a lot more work in advance than students who came 10 years or so before you. And so that you shouldn't be too surprised if you gain admission to a college early decision, if you've done the work as it relates to your financial aid eligibility.
Great. And I know that from over the years, if somebody gets a surprise, if they get admitted and they have a surprise in their financial aid package that might feel unhappy to them, we're going to work with them. We're going to talk with them. There may be circumstances we didn't consider, or we might have missed something. But if in the end they can't ultimately afford Hamilton and there's something different than would have been in their net price calculator, we would release them from the binding commitment. We don't encourage them to go through that process because it's painful for a student who might get in and not be able to attend. But we're never going to hold someone's feet to the fire if in fact it's unaffordable. We'd like to do all of that on the front end though.
Great.
There were some questions about ED1 versus ED2. We do have 2 rounds. There's not really a difference in our philosophy. There are more people who apply early decision round 1. It's just a little more traditional, but some students aren't ready. They want another set of grades. There may be other reasons that they wait and go to the second round. We do enroll about half the class through early decision. We like to be transparent about this, but it's only 18 to 20% of the total offers of admission that we will give out. So we admit many more students regular decision because obviously they don't all choose us. It's not binding as it is with early decision. at Hamilton. So keep all of that in mind. There's a lot of good information. We actually sent an email this week from me that was about early decision. And if you are on our mailing list, you got it. You may or may not have opened it yet, but there's a lot of good information in it. And we're soon going to actually post a copy of that out on our early decision website too. But it goes through all the decisions you can get if you're early decision and what they mean for you, including deferral and other options. Some of our students will be offered Jan admission. And so I'm not going to go into all of that right now. We don't have time, but read that email if you're thinking about early decision. If you're not on our mailing list, get on our mailing list and go to the website where we'll have more information about all of this. We're going to turn soon to the application itself and how we read applications. But one quick question, kind of a midterm question here, is about the role of parents in the process. And I'm going to jump in here a little bit to say, I like to give the bike metaphor. Some parents maybe have heard this before, but remember when you taught your kid how to ride a bike early on, that it was okay to hold the seat and it was okay to run along behind them and it was okay to pick them up when they fall, but nobody ever learned to ride a bike without steering and pedaling and mastering balance. And so this is kind of similar, right? The student needs to be steering and they need to be pedaling, and the parent can give them a push and they can pick them up when they fall, but really the students need to drive that bike. And we understand that parents are along for the ride and they're important and we want to be there for you. And you'll hear a lot from us throughout the process, but we really need you students to drive the bike. And this is the time to start to steer and pedal and voice your own opinions in this process. So we invited both parents and students tonight because you need to be working on this together. Anything you'd like to add, Cameron or Peaches?
I'd love to chime in real fast in saying that when it comes to the financial aid side of things, I love it when students are involved with that process. But in full transparency, that is typically led by parents. So students, if you're fortunate enough to have family members at home who are going to support you through this college search process, that's another place where I think parents have a very clear role in this process, is helping to support the financial aid process.
Absolutely.
I would just add that during this process that your students will be hearing from so many different voices about college. So they're going to be hearing about it constantly from their peers, from their teachers, from their counselors. And so with parents, I definitely agree, as Monica, you were saying with the bike metaphor. I also say to families, you need to be your students' cheerleader, but you also need to be that haven as well, because from all the noise. So they may need someone to not talk to them about college. Maybe you reserve that time for a weekend or something like that, so the student knows it's going to be expected. But at the same time, I think that they need to be just encouraging their student, because this is an amazing opportunity, that this isn't a time for them, for many students, that this is kind of their first real adult decision that they're making for themselves about what path they see themselves, not just for 4 years, but in regards to their career and their profession and what they hope to aspire and to do after college. So I think being a haven for them, also being a cheerleader, and then also kind of being a co-pilot in a way too.
Yeah, that's all great advice. And we've seen a lot of families through this process over the years. And I want to reassure the parents that not everybody gets into every college they apply. And when you start the process, you know that intellectually, instinctively, but when it happens to your own kid, it's hard. It's really hard. And trust me, the students are much more resilient than the parents in most cases. Usually the students will be heartbroken for a day or two or a week, but they will figure out how to move on if you let them. And they're learning this. As far as failure in life goes, this could be devastating, but it's how we learn how to pick ourselves up and be resilient. And they're taking their cues from parents. So remember that and help them. And it's okay for students to have dreams as long as they're their dreams. So if the parent is saying things like, don't you think XYZ college is perfect for you? It sounds like there's only one possible right answer to that question. So maybe there's a different way to ask it and to hear the students' opinions about where they want to apply to college and what they're looking for as well. So, okay, we're gonna let the parents off the hook now and move on. In thinking about putting together the applications before we turn to how we make decisions, the big topic of testing is maybe bigger than ever. even though the role of testing is diminished. And it's because lots of schools have made it optional. And the big question we get, does optional mean optional? Peaches, what do you think about that?
Yes, I do. I do think optional means optional.
Right.
I think that definitely, I think we've learned a lot in regards to testing, and we're going into our second year of being a test optional pilot school. And so I think what it did was it in many ways, it created more access and also provided a lot of relief for students who were worried about, I can't get a test, what do I need to do? So when we're looking at the application itself, we are looking at the information that you've provided to us. So going back to the H word that you mentioned earlier, Monica, we're making a decision based on the sum of all the parts. And we may not have testing as part of that process, and that's okay. So that means that we're going to be looking at other pieces of the application, which may be almost not exact, but maybe comparable in many ways about the academic performance of a student. So we'll look at the courses and the rigor and how they're performing over a period of time. And if they have testing, absolutely, that will be part of the process as well. But basically, if you choose not to submit testing, we will not be sitting there wondering why the student didn't submit testing.
Right. Yep. And in its place, as you said, the other things will count more. And so not how you sing, although that's important and has its place in the application, but who you are as a student, because the testing is similar to your academic components, not a replacement. And so if the single most important part of your application is your transcript. It's the record of the courses you've taken, how much you've challenged yourself, the grades you've achieved, and we learn the most about students. And that's the most important piece in the application, whether we have testing or not. But if we don't have, and when we have testing, we will include that as a sign of your potential. But if we don't have the testing, that academic record will count even more. So if you might not have had as much rigor, or there are a couple bad grades, they may count a little more without testing. But if you have the testing, you have to consider whether or not it reflects your ability and whether you want to submit it. But without it, you're fine. You will not be penalized. We just will look at your transcript and weigh it even more. In many students' cases, that's a great thing, right? And if students do choose to submit their scores, how can they do that, Peaches?
If they choose to submit their scores, one thing is that we actually take self-reported scores. So students can submit them on the common application. Some schools have actually provided it, but you may want to check with your school first if they do that. Or the students will have their score reports sent to us. But I think what's really important is to know that students are applying to a lot of schools. We do not want this to be an additional financial burden on a family to send scores, official scores. So we actually will accept self-reported as part of the process. But if they are admitted and they choose to enroll, we will need verified scores at the end.
Yeah, good. And then let's move off testing for a minute and say, what about the other optional components of the application? Because they may be a little bit different. We have different things that we give students, ways that they can enhance their application or supplement their application. I see some people asked already in the chat, could they submit some supplemental things? We're going to give them opportunities to do that. What's your recommendation or advice for students on that front?
I would say yes again. It is a great way for us to see why you're interested in Hamilton, but also get to learn a little bit more about you that we may not see in the other parts of the application. So as we were mentioning earlier, you will have access to your applicant portal for admission and financial aid, but for admission, we will actually share with you the variety of ways that you can express interest. So it could be a short answer response to a question about Hamilton. And if you're a writer, then absolutely take advantage of that. There's also an opportunity for sending us a personal URL. So if you're really involved in digital media, you'll explain to us why you're sending us a link to maybe a YouTube video, or maybe a portfolio that you've put together. We also, if you're interested in submitting an art supplement, an art portfolio, we also have that available. So if you're a visual artist or a musical artist or a dancer or theater, please share that information with us. It adds to that, it adds to the content that we're going to be able to see and build a story about who you are when we're reviewing your application. We offer interviews. I think that we're very fortunate to be we offer some in-person interviews on a limited capacity, but we also have virtual interviews. So those, definitely take advantage of that. I would recommend that if you want to do an interview, do it sooner than later, simply because our spots fill rather quickly. And then finally, we have another opportunity that we'll list for you is Hamilton Hello. And I think we used it this past spring for this last cycle. And it was a really great short video essay they were candid, they were sincere, they were a little raw, but it gave us a good sense of a student just kind of answering a very just nice and simple question about, why they're interested in Hamilton, but also, what good thing happened to them that week. But I think there are a variety of ways. And what I love about our options that we make available to students after they submitted their application, for the most part, is the fact that they all reflect different strengths that people have. And I think that really reflects our Hamilton community as well. Like, we have our students who come in with different strengths and interests. And so I think our options of showing and expressing interest in this way also is diverse as well.
Great. And just to be clear, there are people who will get in who don't do any of those extra supplemental things. And so you don't have to do all those things, but if you want to enhance your candidacy, if you want to give us more information, it's not going to hurt you. It's only going to help. And so we do recommend, especially if you're super interested in Hamilton, that you take the time to do some of these pieces. You don't have to. This is a different category than the testing, though. The testing is truly optional, and we will use other parts of your academic pieces of your application in lieu of it. Okay, so there's a question here: who makes admission decisions? We do, right? Some of the people who are answering questions in the chat room. Every application has a reader, actually has 2 readers, and then it will go to another round of review after that. And it's not uncommon for an application to be seen before a decision is made by 5 or 6 of us. And sometimes more, and sometimes we'll revisit decisions. So it's not an efficient process. It's in some ways quite laborious, because we're so careful and sensitive and thoughtful, and all those things that you do, whether it's supplemental or your essays, we actually read them. We spend time with them. And as I described earlier, we're trying to understand who you are, all the aspects of you, what you bring to our community, and how you would fit in with this class that we're trying to shape as we invite people to the community. So all those pieces of the application that you spend time on, we do too. And again and again and again, with multiple readers, multiple viewpoints, multiple perspectives, as we try to figure out in the room where it happens who we're going to invite to join the community. And then we turn over our admits to financial aid, where, because we're not need aware, as Cameron said earlier, we're need blind in the admission process. So your financial need is not a factor of the admission decision. We're deciding who we want to admit, turn those over to financial aid, and they meet 100% of the need of the students we're admitting. So it gives you a little window into our process. I said it earlier, but it's worth saying again, the hardest part of our job is figuring out who not to take. We have so many tremendous candidates that it's humbling. And so if you don't get into a college, please don't see it as a personal reflection. It's why you've applied to multiple schools. It's why you build a list. It's why you have a plan, right? Too often we see students who have a plan. I'm going to apply early decision, and I've got these 5 other schools, and they may not get into their early decision school, and they get very nervous and they start adding lots of colleges, but they had a plan and it was a good plan. Stick with the plan. Cameron, you've been through this as a college counselor. Any advice on that front?
No, I'll just again echo what Peaches said in the beginning, which is to have a really balanced list where you could be happy going to any of those schools. And if you do your homework, you should do that. I will offer my own little tip here, which is for those early decision students who don't gain admission to that first choice school, I always allowed a 24-hour mourning period, during which time we were very sad and we didn't talk about the other colleges on the list. But then after that period had passed, we had to refocus our efforts and make sure that we were meeting all of the posted deadlines and doing what we needed to do to move on to another very exciting option.
That's great. I think hopefully you're getting the sense that we're human beings. The process is about as perfect as the people applying, right? It's a very human process, actually. It's really thoughtful. It's intentional. It's not perfect, but we try hard not to make mistakes too. We're really careful and thoughtful and intentional, spend a lot of time. And at the end of the day, we can't invite all the people we'd love to see at Hamilton to join our community. So know that going in, have your plan, put forward the best application you can, and trust us that we don't take your candidacy for granted, that we're going to treat every application with the respect and give it the attention it deserves, whether it's our first application we read or the 5,000th application we receive. We're going to treat every application with respect, regardless of the decision you may receive. And I can promise you that for Hamilton College. I can't promise the outcome and you can't control it necessarily, but I can promise you that we're going to be really careful and thoughtful and not take your candidacy for granted. So I hope you walk away knowing these are human beings. They care. I got to give them the best application I can because they've got to make choice among really strong candidates. And they're splitting hairs sometimes trying to make those choices. That brings me to the essay. I just want to give a quick shout out. One more Hamilton line we like, a line from the musical is, who tells your story? And the answer is you do in the application. Your teachers are going to write recommendations, which are also important to us. Your transcript's going to speak volumes for itself. What you've been involved in is important, but your essay is your chance to have a voice and a seat at the table and to say something that we may not already know about you. Tell us something about yourself that helps shape our picture of who you are, right? You might do that through a supplemental essay or the main essay. Any advice on the writing supplements that either of you have for applicants, Peaches or Cameron?
For the writing supplements, I would say that it's important for students to apply the same attention that they did with their main college personal essay to the supplemental pieces. I think there's so much stress placed on the large essay that sometimes students forget that they should apply the same level of care with the personal one because of the fact that it may be very specific to that school. So you want to make sure that the student, as a student, you may want to make sure that you're spelling things correctly, that you're using the right, you're mentioning the right and appropriate school, but definitely applying a lot more, applying attention to that, because I think sometimes students don't, and they just quickly put something together. And I think it, for us as admissions officers, when we have these, these large and talented applicant pools, it's always great to see that a student has shown interest and has us appropriately assigned to the right city and state and size and things like that.
Okay, great. So we're kind of getting near the end. We have 4 minutes. So we're going to move to lightning round questions. You just started to hit on the question I was going to ask, Peaches, what are some of the common mistakes that people make in the process? Like, what can go wrong here? So Cameron or Peaches, what would you say? I'll start with you, Cameron.
Sure. I would say the most common mistake in kind of my world is students and families not applying for financial aid in a timely manner. And then they might get the really great news that they've gained admission to the college, but because they haven't applied for financial aid, they have no idea what the cost is going to be associated with that. And that always produces a little bit of a scramble. So I think a lot of families over worry themselves that they're going to make mistakes when they're filling out the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And I get that, they're intimidating forms. But you can't be so worried about that you don't submit them. And at least at Hamilton and places like Hamilton, we are going to be collecting your tax documents if you gain admission to the college. And then we go through and we verify everything that you've entered, because we do this every day. And for many, if not most of you, this is going to be the first time you're submitting these financial aid forms. So just meet our deadlines and then trust that we're going to make sure that everything was done correctly.
Peaches, any common mistakes or tips that you might have for families?
I would say specifically that students should consider the application in this process as their handshake, as their first impression to the school, that they're saying, I see myself being a really great fit, and I'm going to show you the best in all aspects of myself to show why I'm a good fit. And so to be thoughtful about that process, because I think you've already mentioned it, Monica, this is a human process. There are humans putting their applications together. There are humans with empathy as well who are reviewing these applications. In the end, we want to make sure that we're building a great fit as well.
Great. Any other advice, Cameron, before we wrap things up here?
Oh, advice? I have lots of advice. I'll give something fairly succinct from my my high school days, which is, again, if you're looking at schools like Hamilton, almost by definition, if not by definition, you've worked really hard in high school. And I think students, like many of you, we can get stuck on a little bit of a treadmill, and we don't ever take a step to the side of the treadmill and say, wow, I've accomplished a lot so far in high school, and isn't this exciting? Instead, we just keep on running. And I think now is the moment to say, wow, I've gotten here. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to go to a great college. All of this work has been worth it. Take stock of the moment. And then, unfortunately, you do have to get back on, and you have to keep on working, because we do care about your senior year transcript when you're going through this process. But this is the moment to kind of take stock and be proud of what you've accomplished to get you here.
Excellent. I think that's great advice. I always say this is a time for self-reflection, to think about who you are. We're back at Know Thyself, where we started, right? Think about who you are and who you want to be and what type of environment that is for you. And as a family, take a little time to think about that. Enjoy this as a family. Breathe a little bit, and students drive that bike. Remember that as well. In closing, I'll say that we've learned a lot over the past year about students, about this process, about your resilience throughout this pandemic, and a lot about your generation, who I would say many grown-ups don't give enough credit to. You are showing up, standing up, persisting with your college dreams, and we saw it in last year's applicants, and we're already seeing it in your class. So we believe in you, and we're here for you. I know other colleges are too, and you're going to have great options. So if we didn't get to your questions tonight, please follow up with us, send us an email. We want to be there for you, and we're really proud of all of the people who stayed with us for the full hour, 200 plus families. So thank you very much. Good luck with the process, and be in touch if you have any questions. We're going to sign out now from the room where it happens. Thank you, Cameron. Thank you, Peaches. And thank you to our staff who've been answering questions, and all the families out there. Have a good night.
Night, everybody.
Night.